oh, we're not able to. Yes, we are. Hello, kids. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. Welcome to Vinyl Junkies, episode 50. Please confirm that this is actually going out now. Save me for from the utter humiliation of doing it again. Hi, Billy.
Hi, I'm trying to find you while on my right hand while I'm looking at you on my left side.
I think we're on though. The
Hey,
devil's right hand. The devil's right hand.
I want someone to tell you. I want someone to tell you that's not you or I that they can hear us.
Well, what I can do is listen. I just put a 5 up, a 5 spot. Okay. Actually, we'll put up a 3 spot because it's the 3 records we're talking about, and we're gonna see if the video comes up. But I think that it will. You're going to be able to win, kids. This Coltrane jazz record, and my life is a complete disaster. Vinyl Junkies World Cup Jazz is live right now as we speak. How about now? How about now? Help me, Jesus and Mary.
I'm trying to help you.
Brother, I'm almost sure that we're on, and I just ruined the first 1 minute and 13 seconds trying to do this. I swear to God, man, there's got to be...
we're human beings. We make mistakes.
Yeah, look, I'm a dumbass at this. But can I tell you what this was supposed to start like? Welcome, everybody, to legendary episode 50, the jazz episode after the World Cup final, with my illustrious mustachioed host from New York, Billy Fields. Billy, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you, Sam? Are you sure that we're on the air now?
I think that we are on the air now, but they're going to have to tell me. Somebody is going to have to send me something.
That's like...
Dude,
but hello, how are you? How are you doing today, Sam?
I have been doing really well. This show, I have been looking so forward to it. You have no idea. And it gives you a little bit of an arch at the inside, you know, when things don't go right, but that's the way it is sometimes. I think we're only on YouTube. That's what's happening. Okay? So what we're going to do is, yeah, we're on YouTube. Talk about jazz. And we're going to give away some records, kids. So John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon, and Antonio Carlos Jobim, all courtesy of Org Music. And you watched the World Cup, didn't you, Billy? You watched it?
I watched some of it like a good American would.
And what did you think?
I watched 4 minutes of the first half. Actually, just to the point to where the handball occurred, the review happened, France went up 2-1. And then I spent halftime attempting to make my phone stream the game so I could watch the second half. That proved to be problematic for the first 3 minutes of the half.
You want to tell me about streaming problems? I know about streaming problems.
It was a little ridiculous, I have to tell you. It was,
I thought so too. You know, it's like you would expect a closer game. You would want one, but hey, you know, we're not going to think about it for another 4 years. Instead, what we'll do is focus, Billy. We're going to focus our attention on perhaps you challenge me if you wish, or just, but it seems like probably in my memory, as a collector of jazz, probably the best week or couple of weeks of new jazz releases that I can remember. I can't remember 2 jazz releases coming out that were this important. Of course, we're talking about Kamasi's last record, which was Heaven and Earth, and John Coltrane, a recently unearthed 63 session that we're going to go on with at length, called Both Sides at Once.
Both directions at once, knucklehead.
Both directions at once, yes.
We're going both directions
at once. So we're going to talk about those and try to factor in the vinyl experience, which is to say that, you know, anyone can listen to the music straight off Spotify if you want. And we have created Spotify playlists for those of you who are interested in the records that we're talking about, Billy and I. You know, there's a Spotify playlist, listen to the music. If you like it, hey, cool. Then we must have done something right. Certainly not the technical aspect of running a show, but otherwise.
And I would mention, by the way, Sam, that there absolutely will be things that we talk about that are not in your playlist. So if people are interested, they should pay attention and bookmark or old school notebook with a writing and implement.
Actually, what it is that I do, is I just updates the playlists after the show is over. So, for example, during our pregame over here, you showed me 2 Japanese jazz records, and you're going to talk about them, and I'm looking forward to it because they're artists that I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to put them on the jazz playlist. That's the entire, that's the entire point. So it should be fun, man. I'm looking forward to what it is that you're bringing forward. You know what I'm thinking? You picked up the new Kamasi Washington, right? Heaven and Earth?
That is correct. Yesterday at my local shop, Darkside Records in Poughkeepsie, New York.
All right. And yeah, I just saw you break the seal on it. We're gonna talk. Well, we're gonna talk about that record a little bit, and I guess I'm gonna have to say that I'll give you the good and the bad when it comes to it, and you guys can decide for yourself. But there are things to consider before plunking down the money on the record, or at least that's what I think. Let's talk about the music first before we really go into the product. Have you had a chance to listen to it at all, Billy?
And I'll be honest, a tiny bit on the earbuds from my Spotify sync. Excuse me, my Apple Music sync that I have on my phone. So not a whole lot. I did though spend some time with his the Epic prior to this one coming out in the office.
Absolutely, sure.
So I've been drenched with a little Kamasi Washington of late, but not his new 4-album plus. Yeah, and we'll talk all about the plus too. Sure.
Well, I had a chance to listen to it all the way through a couple of times, and I've spent a good 2 weeks with it, so I'd like to kind of give you the evolution of what I thought. Talking about the music's really simple because, I mean, it's very personal, so you can't really say whether something's good or not. I can put it in context of the Epic, for example. I can do that without any problem. Have you had a chance to ever hear the EP that he did, Harmony of Difference?
The one in between? No, I have not.
Oh, dude, that one's amazing. That one's kind of an extension of the Epic, okay? And Harmony of Difference, look, when I bought it, I generally, even if it's a really long, big thing, I commit to the time to listen to something well. Okay, so that's to say that there's 10 sides of music, I'm going to listen to 10 sides of music. Now, that secret record, it needs to be said, wasn't so secret because the fact that there was that 5th record hidden inside the package was, in a Discogs entry before the record ever came out. The fans, they know this stuff, man.
Well, that's interesting. I think that defeats the purpose of actually putting a hidden record into a package if it's already known before people. I mean, the whole point is you deliver a surprise that fans get to then
discover,
talk about, and sort of own the surprise themselves. So that's an odd bit of information I wasn't aware of.
Well, actually, you know what? That's probably that's just one of the interesting things that one of the things that just makes this record so unique. There's so much about this record that's unique, and I have a feeling that in terms of jazz, it's going to go down like that PIL box set in that aluminum can.
In the tin?
Yeah, in the tin that's oxidized, and it's impossible to get open, and it's like it's beautiful and it's collectible, but it's the biggest pain in the ass in the world.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's going to probably fall into that category. We'll try to outline exactly why, but
so hold on first. I just want to take I just had a brief idea. So essentially what people are going to be looking for in 20 years from now, let's pretend we're 20 years in the future and people need to have Kamasi Washington, Heaven and Earth. They're going to be looking for the copies where the EP was never taken out of the pocket.
Yes.
Like, with Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor, you're trying to find the copy where someone didn't actually do the watercolor on the inner sleeve where it brings the color out, right?
Absolutely.
That's what this is going to be about. Who doesn't open the EP because they can just listen to music and they leave it intact? I think, by the way, with the struggle I had this morning deciding what kind of knife to use to open it, I'm going to be one of the guys that doesn't open the EP.
Well, I'm actually just showing a copy of my EP that's opened, and it was a disaster opening it. Okay, now, yeah, I realize that the quote-unquote value of the record goes up if you keep it intact, but that's not why I buy records. So, to me, you know, if there's a beautiful poster that I like in the record, as much as, you know, there's this huge Lee Hazelwood poster that I have just plastered on my wall, right, to the box set. It's gorgeous. Have you ever seen the Light in the Attic compilation that they did of Lee Hazelwood with all the naked women with the mustaches?
Yeah.
Right? They did, for the box set, they make this huge poster of that, and I have it splattered on my wall, right? So it's like, of course it's going to bring down the value, but it's not really why I collect. For me, that stuff's meant to be enjoyed, and, you know, you're going to have to deal with the staple marks and the fact that it probably smells like Otto's jacket after years of hanging up there, you know?
Yep, look, man, there's something about that, though, too, like, you know, again, like pretend we're 20 years in the future. Someone actually comes through your bunker basement and says, "Oh, I know where that poster goes. I'm going to take it off the wall carefully. I'm going to fold it back up. I'm going to put it in that record. We're going to sell that." And somebody's going to open that up and say, "Hey, man, this was well loved. This is a record that's been played. They've used the poster. You know, it's like when you find old records with previous like original record store price stickers on them,
or
like,
or people that mark their names
of the history of the record that makes it more alive."
The radio copies are always fun, right? Because radio copies always make a point of writing on the covers and stamping 1,000 stickers on them to make sure that they don't get stolen and they can be found. There's a whole thing behind them. Are you one of those guys that, let's say you find those radio copies, right? One thing, let's say if we go into jazz, CTI, during the 70s especially, okay, we're very, very big into handing out a ton of white label copies. So if you're a collector of CTI stuff, finding white label stuff, white label is the promo stuff. They're the first stampers. Right. And for people who collect vinyl, they're the ones who quote unquote sound better. Okay, but all CTI sounds good, let's face it, right?
Yeah,
but,
they do.
But yeah, those records, those radio promos, a lot of them, they'll sound good, but they got stickers everywhere. Are you one of those guys, Billy, that just tries to remove all the stickers and bring the record back to, like, new condition?
The only stickers I remove now are the newly applied price stickers from the shop that I'm buying it from presently. That's the only stuff I'll take off. And if those stickers have a name of the shop on them, I sometimes will leave those on because, again, it sort of is the history of the record itself, and it's almost like the provenance of where it was, how you got it, where it came from.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I do the exact same thing. One thing does frustrate me, though. When it comes to this, it's funny, right? It's an aside because we haven't even gotten into the jazz yet, but it just shows we're going to have an interesting show. There's so much to talk about with Billy. One thing that I do when it comes to those stickers, like when you're talking about hype stickers would be the perfect example. Sure. What do you do with hype stickers? I'll let you...
It depends on the... It depends. That's all I can say. Very rarely I will actually keep them, throw them in the record, keep them with the... Because I'll take them out of the shrink. Usually I take everything out of shrink and then put them into an outer plastic sleeve.
Okay.
So if it's a hype sticker that I find to be particularly interesting, if it's a hype sticker that actually details out the limited edition nature of the record, and that's the only place that information sort of exists with the record itself, I'll keep those. Otherwise, open them up, goes in the trash can.
What I'll do is, this was one of the records I wanted to talk about, so I guess I'll use this as a way to maybe go into it. There's a record that was put out by Superior Viaduct pretty recently called Cosmic Music. It's John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane. It's a record that was originally available only on, I think, a private press. So it's not something that was... It's one of those highly sought-after John Coltrane records. Superior Viaduct make excellent pressings of everything, very high standards. They put this out, and I bought it, and it's what you would expect, right? Because the John Coltrane with Alice Coltrane is the later stuff. He was his last wife. Naima was his first wife. So it's all the stuff that happens when he starts going a little bit on the crazier, more spiritual side. That's what you get here. Getting back to the hype sticker, there's a little hype sticker. What it is that I do is I grab the sleeve, and I'm just showing the sleeve here because one of the record stores I buy from, they put the price tag on the sticker, and then I take the hype sticker off, it's right here, and I put it on the inner sleeve. So what I do is I stick the inner sleeve, I put stick this hype sticker on the inner sleeve, and then put the price tag underneath also, and it kind of gives me a history of the record. You know, kind of, I guess it's the equivalent of taking out library books and how they stamp everything.
Sure. Yeah, sure. How do you get the, are you taping them?
I'm taping them. What happens is, wow, dude, if you really want to get into nerd stuff, what happens is it becomes about the quality.
About we are nerds.
We are nerds, right? It becomes about the glue that they stick it with. And some people do hype stickers right, and some people do hype stickers wrong. I actually have an opinion on this, Billy. I didn't think I'd be talking about it, but I'm glad I am. Okay? Yeah. Because I keep the hype stickers, and because I do stick them on inner sleeves, right. I always try to remove them. Now, there are places that do it so that the hype sticker comes off very easily. It peels off, and it can adhere to another surface. That's what you want. There's others where it's impossible, like literally almost impossible not to damage the hype sticker without removing the plastic. So what I wind up doing there is I have to cut all around, right, to get it right, like the same thing, and then I grab a glue stick. I'm not kidding, dude. I got a glue stick back there for that purpose. So I grab a glue stick, put it on the back of the hype sticker, which I couldn't take off the fucking adhesive because it's no good, and I put it on the cover. See?
Wow.
See? And that's it. It makes it nice and easy, but people don't think about that. Collectors realize something. We're nuts. We're crazy. Okay? If it was just about the music... Pardon?
You're a whole nother breed, brother. I'm sorry, but... by the way, I think it's... I have never even thought to take it and put it on the inner sleeve the way that you just showed. I find that to be actually incredibly clever, to be quite honest. Because,
well, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Look, how many times have you been sold on a hype sticker? Okay, now this record, for example, I'm thinking about, I mean, in my case, listen, I'm a hardcore Coltrane collector, so I'll buy it all. Okay, I knew about the record, but I'm talking about, let's just say somebody else, right? You come across this record, needs to be said, the cover actually is from a sketch that John Coltrane did, right? So it's not the prettiest album either. It was released with a private release kind of thing. So the hype sticker, you look at it and it says originally released in 1968. Fiery incantations from Train's legendary Final Quintet and inspired improvisations from Alice Coltrane's very first sessions as a band leader. And then in quotes it says, "May there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation. John Coltrane." Dude.
You gotta keep that.
Well, if you just listen to that, right, and you have even an inkling of who Alice Coltrane is, and you have an inkling, you see that quote, so already, as a fan of something like A Love Supreme, you already know he's on that spiritual level. It serves, for a guy like me, it serves as a motivator to buy records. I have been convinced by hype stickers before. Haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
Yeah. So for me, the reason, I guess, why it is that I'm saying all of this is because I believe that the hype sticker is part of the vinyl experience. It is part, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I try to keep that intact as much as possible. And when it is that, you know, we talk about records, it's not just about the music because, you know, opinions about music are so personal and there's no right opinion. And honestly, I find it extremely arrogant to place a numerical value on a work of art. It offends me. It really offends me. I think it's, you know, the height of human arrogance. Art means different things to different people, and the people who make the art are in different... It's just, you know, it's not quantifiable. It's as simple as that. And to just try to quantify things might make it easy for people to understand, but I believe that you're speaking a completely different language that takes away from the essence of what art's supposed to be. It takes away from the purity of it. If that makes me an art snob, I'm comfortable with that. I am. Okay.
Hey, you gotta embrace your art snob. Come on.
Dude, listen, man. It matters. It's just, you know, somebody takes this record and puts an 8.8 on it. Are you fucking kidding? John Coltrane was like a unicorn in the universe. You're going to give it an 8.8? You know what? Right. What you say doesn't matter. So just the fact that you would express yourself that way is not some. The languages don't sync. It doesn't work. You understand? And I think
I prefer a couple things, Sam. One is I prefer to read the album notes from the original pressings.
Yes.
Plenty of great journalists, jazz reviewers, jazz artists, label heads. They wrote great prescient, extensive notes about the players, the tracks, sort of a little bit of a bio about like how it came to be and some of the history and who they played for before. I think that's what you need to make a judgment about something. I don't think you need to read how the record made a particular person feel necessarily, or yeah, I don't know. I prefer album notes.
I absolutely prefer album notes as well, but I do read the reviews because, again, you know, I'm always looking for little pieces. It's interesting also to know what other... It's just... You can't think of yourself only in a vacuum, right? The entire idea over here is to have the conversation, not to deliver a report. It's to open the conversation about the art. What did it do? And in doing that, we make a bunch of connections. We start talking about this album from this period, and then we start going into, you know, in terms of the new John Coltrane record, it was recorded in '63. There's a lot of ties to be made there, you know? So that's the stuff that comes from conversation rather than quantifying something. I don't know. Maybe I bristle at it more than the average person, but it's not something that I feel it does a great disservice both to the artist and to the entire process.
Yeah, I think that has been the struggle forever when it comes to an artist attempting to be comfortable in their lives by making the art that they conceive. And, you know, you go through eras all the way back to, the Renaissance, and you had benefactors and you had families and churches that actually paid for much of that artwork, and then it came through and it was kings and royalty and etc. And you get into a modern age where it's now, you know, there's huge apparatuses in place that have to do all these things that you have to support with the money. Yep. It's a constant struggle.
Well, that's basically really the crux of one of Kanye West's biggest meltdowns on radio, where he basically, you know, starts comparing himself to every fucking Renaissance genius there is, and he's asking himself, here I am, I'm my art, I work, I suffer for my art, you know, I'm this great genius, where's my Medici family?
Right.
You know, so it's funny how we managed to work in Kanye West into this, but I have a feeling that it's going to be happening quite a bit. He's an interesting cat.
I think maybe you should try and get him into every episode somehow, and just it could be your new thing.
Oh Jesus, God help us all. So look, we were going to talk about Kanye, but you know what, man? We're on a John Coltrane thing. Do you want to go on John Coltrane, or should we go back to Kanye? I'm good either way.
No, I think that a segue to the topic of the episode, jazz, is probably the right thing to do now.
Okay, so should we go Coltrane first, or should we continue on Kamasi?
I think that we should jump back to Coltrane, because there's something I want to bring up about the Coltrane. And you, I'm sure, know this record as well. And it made me, when you brought this up about the Kamasi and also the new Coltrane record and when it was recorded, the year that we're talking about, and also that it's a lost album, I immediately thought about I want to say in 2005, I think, when the Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane Live at Carnegie Hall was found. And sort of what happened when that record came out. And by the way, it's actually finally out on LP as well. Obviously, it's been out for a while now. But just thinking about how excited people become when an artist or artists of this stature end up revealing through weirdness of history and misplaced archival activity, a piece of music that people haven't heard before. and the drive sort of the audience to find all this content. And YouTube has unearthed so much of this for all sorts of genres across the globe. But I think it's really interesting that you had this Monk Coltrane, which I believe that was recorded in 57.
Okay.
So obviously well before the 60s ascension, sorry guys, of Coltrane, as the force that he was in that 60s period. But also sort of I guess we could maybe say the height of Monk as well. So you had almost like this overlapping of who these giants were and would become in a lost album that becomes found. And then you segue into the present, almost 15 years later, a lost record that's found by John Coltrane, recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's studio, recorded by Van Gelder,
produced by Bob Thiel, the whole deal.
Like every single piece that you need to have to say, like, well, this is, your bona fides are like on point. And it's such a strange thing to think that, okay, we have it all, we've got the whole document, and then you don't. You have something else that has to fit into it. It's just it's always exciting and revelatory for me.
Brother, I'm so fucking enjoying this conversation. You have no idea. It's like I'm anxiously waiting my turn to get your part. If we look at the sad part of the whole Coltrane thing in that period, okay, I know you know this also, the great tragedy, which we saw a lot in jazz, but a lot of these tapes were just thrown out in the trash. It's just they didn't make space for them when things went digital, right? They just threw a bunch, like secretaries would just throw these original recordings in the trash. The reason that it is that I'm saying this and what makes this particular Coltrane record so special is, listen, Coltrane never stopped playing. Never. Okay? The big thing that Miles always said, the big story that they had is, at one point John Coltrane was with Miles Davis, and a train goes to Miles and says, I can't stop playing. And Miles said, well, you can start by taking that fucking horn out of your mouth. Okay? So, never. Now, when you look at him joining Impulse, before Impulse happened, let's look at his career a little bit, okay? Because this guy was a genuine superstar in jazz. He leaves Miles Davis's superstar group. Okay, so he releases Giant Steps, which takes jazz in another direction, but it's still a strong jazz record. But that's not where the tipping point is, because by that point it's 59. Now he goes into his Atlantic years. 1961 happens, dude. 1961, dude, is My Favorite Things. He records My Favorite Things, and it becomes a crossover hit. It becomes this massive thing to the point that Atlantic even releases the 45, right? And everybody wants everything Coltrane. So there's this glut of Coltrane that happens there. A few things happen in this period. One thing is Impulse comes up and basically gives him the equivalent of golden handcuffs. Do whatever you want, we'll give it to you. Okay, right. And Bob Thiel was extremely enthusiastic and very helpful when it comes to that. Basically, the world is your oyster. We'll give you time no matter what. That's one thing. The other thing that happens is he becomes hugely in demand, and a lot of his older stuff just starts showing up, right? So he worked a lot of sessions on the Prestige label where he's just a sideman.
Yep.
The thing is those side sessions, listen, the side musicians happened to be Thelonious Monk and Sonny Rollins and Bill Evans. It's just only the greatest, jazz players of all time. But the thing is,
record machine, but from the jazz side, yeah.
So that, but that's not really John Coltrane's music. That's him playing other people's music. And while all of this is happening, Atlantic is blowing up, right? Because he's got My Favorite Things, which becomes a standard that he changes up every single time. Now, this is kind of the transition period that happens, right? He's got his quintet, the big quintet, Elvin Jones and fucking, right? The entire thing that we have over here, okay? And he's headed towards 65, which is a Love Supreme. He's starting to work things out, and he's moving away. This is one of the reasons that the album's called Both Directions at Once, and the song on the album is actually, it was one of the only songs. There's a lot of untitled songs, and there's other stuff that he's done before, like Nature Boy on it, but there's one song that had an original title of Both Directions at Once, and that was one of the only ones. So what they did in the liner notes, and dude, this takes us back to what you were saying. If you can see it on YouTube if you want. It's only available on YouTube right now. But what I'm going to do is unfold the liner notes to show you what they look like. On one side, there's just this huge poster, okay, of Elvin Jones behind the kit. But on the other side, dude, you flip it over, and it's kind of like just a 4-page newspaper, chock full of legible liner notes with pictures. What winds up happening as I'm listening to this record, dude, is, and I didn't expect this, but it pleased me so greatly. I dropped the needle, and again, when you're buying a record on vinyl, it's the vinyl experience that matters. And I don't know if this was planned or not, but it was just, if it wasn't, it was a sheer bit of serendipitous brilliance, right? Because I dropped the needle, and I'm listening to this work for the first time, and I dig into the liner notes, and the liner notes fold out like an old-time newspaper. So there I am. I've basically got it open, and it takes me back to memories of 20 years ago, way before the internet existed, when I used to buy my Sunday paper and listen to my records while reading the newspaper. It brought me that immediately. And it's just immediately, it's like, well, you know, these two things are now connected. This record takes on extra meaning because there's an emotional attachment that happens. But those liner notes, Billy, are so freaking awesome because what they do is they put it in a time and place, exactly what I'm trying to explain, right? What came before, what was happening at the time, and what came after. We already, so he's not yet at a Love Supreme, but the band's firing on all cylinders. He's coming off hugely big, massive mass acceptance in terms of a jazz artist. Both because he just came off Miles Davis and they came off a tour from Europe, all the rest of this. He comes out as an Atlantic superstar with My Favorite Things. He gets this sweetheart deal with Impulse. Okay, so now these are some of the early records. And if you have to place the catalog or the trajectory of those Impulse records in 1963, you think about the stuff that bookended this particular record, and it's pretty interesting, and it lends to the title of Both Directions at Once, because there's three different things that kind of show a certain duality and trying to make it work together, okay? And this is one of them. If you look at this, it's by reading the liner notes, right? You look through it, and what they talk about is how Bob Thiele would basically have to hide, because there was such a glut of Coltrane records that were coming out. Bob Thiele would have to hide the fact that he just kept putting Coltrane in the studio, because it's like, dude, this guy's getting crazier and crazier. How are we going to sell these records? There's Coltrane all over the place right now, right? But he believed so much in what he was doing that he would record him at night. He would record him late at night when nobody was around, okay? And then basically just say, hey, look at this great session I recorded. And the way it is that they placed all of this is that when it came to the timing and doing the studio time and everything, what the band would go play at Birdland. Okay, so they have to trek down to Birdland. They'd work out a lot of these pieces there and the directions that they're going in, and they'd then go record them. That was the basic thing that was happening, just over and over and over again. Okay, so in doing this, check this, dude. While he was at Birdland, all in the liner notes again, he's on a double bill, okay? While this album is being recorded Both Directions at Once, he starts off the thing on a double bill with Thelonious Monk. So you go to Birdland. Can you imagine, dude, 1963, you go to Birdland. Oh, yeah, you know what? We're going to go watch Thelonious Monk and fucking John Coltrane. Right?
It's crazy, man.
Right? Thelonious Monk eventually gets off the bill. You know who winds up on the second part of the bill? Art Blakey. Okay, so what? Now we go from like maybe the best, you know, one of the greatest jazz pianists ever to one of the greatest jazz drummers ever. You know, so just kind of to let you know how fucking sweet this period is that he's doing this. You know, and the music is, you can notice it in the music because there's those blasts of the crazy stuff, so you kind of hear where he's beginning to stretch out and the band's, you know, but it's steeped in the traditions as well. So again, it lends to the only titled song and the theme of the record and the way it is that they conceived this many years afterwards, right?
Right.
Both directions at once. He's caught at the situation where he wants to become a Love Supreme, and he's well on a trajectory to become a Love Supreme, and he's literally recording and playing 24/7. Yeah. You know, so he's getting there that quickly. But on the other hand, you know, the reason he got a Sweetheart deal is he's got to sell a lot of records. So he's got to, you know, he's got to play My Favorite Things and everything. So that I'm sorry.
I just wonder, you know, the last time we were on a show, we talked a little bit about, I think it was actually around Record Store Day, we talked about the Neil Young Live at the Roxy.
Yes.
Wherein he and the band were in the studio, would drive down Santa Monica Boulevard, play live at the Roxy, and then they'd go back and forth. So when they did that show, obviously it was very impacted by what they were doing in the studio. So this explanation of, here's John Coltrane recording this in the Rudy Van Gelder studio in New Jersey, coming over into Manhattan, going to Birdland to play these shows. I just wonder how much scholarship it would take, essentially, to look at that string of shows during that time period to sort of make the connections between what was going on in the club, playing both with Monk and then with Blakey, and how those shows informed what he was doing in the studio and vice versa. I mean, I understand the whole idea is both directions at once is sort of pointing to Coltrane's both directions at once, but I'm also curious if there's a subtext to it that says it's also about the studio, the live, going at the same time, and how each of those informed the recordings that he made.
Well, you've actually completely touched upon something, because that is the case. And I mean, I think a lot of it isn't said as explicitly as you said it, but I would think, for example, for me as a music guy, if I heard this conversation we were having, I'd immediately want to go in that direction. Okay, but the thing that they bring up, okay, to use your particular example is, again, we go back to My Favorite Things. My favorite, okay, well, let me preface that. Here on this, okay, in terms of both directions, some of the quote-unquote standards that have been recorded before, but these are different versions. There's Nature Boy, okay, and then there's Impressions, and Impressions was done 1,000,000 times. And in the liner notes, they basically go into the fact that Impressions lends itself to exactly what you're saying. What I mean by that is Impressions was the kind of song that John Coltrane just played over and over and over again and took it in 1,000 different directions. He's basically working it through live. Okay, now the most obvious example on Coltrane's catalog is My Favorite Things. Okay, and you can very, very easily just try to focus on getting every version of My Favorite Things done live, and you'll be taken on a journey unto itself. The liner notes alludes to exactly what you're talking about, right? And they do it not with My Favorite Things. They spend more time with Impressions and saying, you know what, Impressions was kind of like filled that same gap, but in this area, you know. My Favorite Things happened in '61, and that's where it is that he stretched it. I mean, he still played it throughout his career, but he stretched it from '61 onwards. Impressions was '63, and that's what he began doing, and there have been supposedly rabbit holes that go into where that plays into, and that's exactly what you're talking about, that Neil Young example, you know? So yeah, I'm sure there's a book to be written there, man. I'd read it.
I'm not going to write it, by the way, because I don't have enough of that to get that done the way it should be done. But
Yeah.
maybe someone should, for sure. I mean, I just think about, there's so many shows, there's so many records that have been released about, live at Village Vanguard, live at Shelly Manhole, or Shelly Man's, the Manhole, whatever that was called.
Yeah, it was called the Manhole.
Totally butchering that for a second. But there's, live at Birdland. There are all these sets that were recorded and then released live at Town Hall, Jazz the Philharmonic, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, Blue Notes.
And now what happens is you have artists that are on the road that literally are recording every single thing that they're doing when they're performing. And man, if it wouldn't have been great that occurred in the 50s into the 60s as well. But I got to imagine that both cost, recording technology, tape, I mean, all the things that it would take to actually get that done has made it a bit problematic. But
you just make me cry when you say this, because everything points to that existed for John Coltrane.
I'm just saying,
I'm sure that so much got thrown out.
Fucking, like, nirvanic moments that occur in a club like that happen like by pure magic. That it's just like a vortex of like perfection,
dude.
And you had to be there. That kills me because I was born too late for that.
Alabama.
And that's same on the rock side, by the way. It's like There's so many artists that I want to have seen then. I have no interest in seeing them now.
The minute you described that, the first thing that came to mind, especially when that came to mind immediately, was Alabama. Alabama, which I believe was recorded live at the Village Vanguard again as the record. I'm not sure exactly which one, but Coltrane went on with his band, and some black kids were lynched in Alabama, and it affected him. So he just performed this live, and it brings a tear to the eye. It's one of the greatest moments in a musical genius's career, but it's exactly what you described. It happened only then, and you had to be there. Thank God it was captured.
Yeah.
How
many of those were not captured?
Well, plenty. I mean,
I'm just saying it's just like, wow.
Yeah. And what's fun about that is, look, you look
That's
at
what's weird about lost records, by the way.
And these are and they are that big a deal. Actually, you know what? Another thing that was said in the liner notes, you got to read these liner notes. Obviously, so all of this is that I'm saying is that Both Directions at Once is 1,000% a complete vinyl experience. It's an amazing experience, and it's something that you're going to wind up playing along with everything else, and it's extremely accessible. So it's not the crazy heavy impulse, because when you're looking at Both Directions at Once, he was headed there, but on the other hand, the session that he recorded right after this session was recorded, the day after, same studio, Van Gelder, everything, he recorded the Johnny Hartman and John Coltrane record.
Wow.
The day after, dude. And Johnny Hartman was basically just, a baritone, gorgeous crooner. And it's a record of ballads. It's beautiful, but it's completely different.
Wow, interesting.
And around the same time, the same year, he recorded the Ballads record on Impulse. He recorded the record with Duke Ellington.
Right.
So it's it just points in terms of the Impulse years. It points to this, I guess, divergence where you have to sell records on the one hand, but on the other hand, you have to capture this magic that this person is creating, that if you don't capture it, it's gone forever. You know what I'm saying? It's that moment this time, and in the liner notes or on the sticker, I forgot the hype sticker, but they had one quote from Sonny Rollins, who likened this record as finding a new room in Tutankhamun's tomb.
Huh.
It's a great analogy.
Awesome. And by the way, the local news is they've just found the largest granite sarcophagus ever in Egypt, right?
Yeah. So that's what he likened it to. I wonder, you know what? Sonny Rollins is a pretty sharp cat, even as old as he is now. I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what it is that informed that analogy.
Right.
Wouldn't put it past him.
You never know, man. He might be tapped into something that we don't know about.
So,
I'm sure he is.
You want to go to Kamasi? Do you have any finishing thoughts, sir?
Let's see. Well, I wanted to, one of the things you talked about was like, let's look at some of the other jazz records that came out.
Yes.
In '63, sort of around the time that this was recorded, or records that were either recorded or released. And so when I was looking through the list, and it's the list I pulled up is, I mean, I'm not a brain surgeon, but just Wikipedia sort of records released in that year. The things that really pop out to me that sort of point to where my taste in jazz flows. That year was Bill Evans' Conversations with Myself, an amazing record. And obviously, when you look at sort of Bill Evans's output, both as a member of Miles Davis's group, but also on his own and his trio, that's just one piece in such a large catalog that it's astounding how magical his records are. Lee Morgan,
Sidewinder.
Holy crap! What
a bunch of Art Blakey records.
Well, a bunch of Art Blakey records, but that Lee Morgan, I'll tell you, it has to be 2009 maybe. I took a visit to. I visited Elusive Disc in Indiana. I visited Music Direct in Chicago, and I visited Acoustic Sounds out in Salina, Kansas.
Awesome.
They're all online sellers. They're all audiophiles. They sell great records.
I love Acoustic Sounds.
So here, anyway, so I'm in the warehouse with Chad at Acoustic Sounds, and we're looking at records. And he had done all of those. He was carrying, all those Music Matters 2LP 45 editions that they had done.
Yeah.
And I pulled out the Lee Morgan Tomcat record. And, I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that I loved how it looked. And that was really it. It was a look of it. His recommendation saying, like, this is a great record, you should pick it up. And that was sort of my introduction to Lee Morgan, just period. Like, who is this guy that plays, who is this trumpet player, right? And it makes you feel kind of stupid once you start to get into the records and look at his catalog. Sidewinder is a great example. But that record that they did for Music Matters, there was never an official Tomcat release in the U.S., so they actually refashioned and did a new cover based on sort of the stylings of Blue Note.
Okay.
So that jacket that Music Matters did was a brand new jacket that looked spot on, exactly like it came right out of original issue. And I then jumped from that into Sidewinder, into what's the Candy one? Candy. Is this called Candy? So is that correct?
I don't have a lot of Lee Morgan, man.
Anyway, it doesn't. It's not my. The point is, like, getting turned on to him from an earlier record to a later record, and seeing this through line, looking at 1963 and saying, like, wait a second. So these Art Blakey records came out: Caravan, Buhania's Delight, Ugetsu. Looking at Bill Evans' Conversations with Myself, looking at Lee Morgan, Sidewinder.
Two Charles Mingus records.
Yeah, fucking Sun Ra.
Dude, two Charles Mingus records.
It's crazy.
On Impulse.
That's a crazy year.
Mingus on Impulse, okay? Mingus.
Yeah.
And one that, like, elevated just the language of Mingus jazz, but not accessible to everybody, but just like another worldly piece of art is Black Saint and Sinner Lady.
That is one of my favorite album covers.
I didn't like it the first time. I didn't get it the first time. It's like, this is weird. Now it's one of my favorite Mingus records ever.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
It's just the stuff that was coming out at that time. And actually, I have a record in the background now, Miles Davis, 7 Steps to Heaven. So just to kind of give you a side-by-side after they parted ways from Europe, Miles Davis is starting to mess around with, eventually getting to his second great quintet, but not quite there yet. 7 Steps to Heaven is considered one of those in-between records, but there's no bad records in For me, there's no bad records in Miles Davis's 60s catalog. None. They're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was one which should be able to take us right to Kamasi, Washington. Okay. Those of you that are kind of curious to know about these songs and you want to see what Billy and I are talking about, we have a Spotify playlist. Now, it's only live on YouTube, and I put up the link there. But if you want to go to the Spotify playlist, it's got all the songs that we feature on the show. So a lot of the stuff that Billy's talking about, like the Lee Morgan, that's not there now, but I'll add it later so that you really get a complete experience of the stuff that we're talking about, and you can go dig and see for yourself. One record that I kept off because it'll segue perfectly into the Kamasi, Washington is... one of Freddie Hubbard's most important, hugest records came out, Hubtones, in '63. And the connection that it makes to Kamasi, Washington is the 5 LP we were talking about, the hidden disc, right? That hidden disc is called The Choice, which is really cool. So there's 5 records here, okay? And the way it is that he breaks it down is Heaven, Earth, and then The Choice. And The Choice is the hidden record, which, you have to choose whether you're going to slit open your package and listen to the music or keep the package intact. I found that really clever as an idea. I liked that, right?
I like that idea.
So I enjoyed all of that. And what's really fun about this, like I said, I do read the reviews. Somehow, when it comes to this record, I know Pitchfork did it, but I think other people did it as well. They reviewed Heaven and Earth as one thing and The Choice as an EP.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, I've seen that as well.
And it's funny because, their numerical value is quite low when it comes to The Choice, and because he adds nothing new. And I found The Choice to be probably my favorite thing, because what it is that he's doing, he's getting down and dirty with stuff that matters to him. So I like players who just go out and can lay down a ballad, or players that can go out and lay down a standard. And one of the standards that they do is Hubtones, which came out in '63. Okay, and on the Spotify playlist, what I did was I purposely did Hubtones and I put them back to back, so you can hear Freddie Hubbard's original 1963 version, and then follow it up by Kamasi, Washington's that's on this second, this secret disc, The Choice. And you hear the themes, but you can hear that Kamasi's rendition is clever and takes it in a different direction. And that's why, to me, this review, I think it was 6.6 or something on Pitchfork, it gets on my tits so bad because I loved that record. And there's another cover on it, but it's a completely different thing. And conceptually, what I liked so much about this Kamasi record is that even though it's 5 records and over 3 songs, they did something. It's like taking a 1,000-page book and breaking it down into segments and chapters and all the rest of this, right? There's an author that I used to read, this kind of like really dark nouveau noir guy named Andrew Vax. Mm-hmm. And I love the way this guy writes. But one of the things that I loved that made it so that I would read his books in one sitting very often is that the guy would sometimes write chapters that were just a few sentences long. Right. So you knew just another chapter, before you know it, you're at the end of the book.
Right. Before you know it, you've read all night and it's 3 a.m. You're like,
I got to go to work tomorrow morning.
Right.
Yeah. So I found that the way that they broke it up conceptually, Heaven, Earth, and The Choice, I found it clever and I liked it, because the first time I listened to the record, as I was, saying, is I sat back and I committed myself to getting a drink, smoking a joint, and just listening to the thing and absorbing it. Right. The only thing that I would interact with for myself would be the liner notes and play around, because I wanted to see what that vinyl experience was. So that 3 hours at once was challenging. It was challenging, very.
Sure.
Okay. So the fact that they split it up the way they did made me happy, because now it kind of allows me to kind of like absorb the music the way Kamasi intended it conceptually, without feeling like I'm not, without having to listen to like all fucking 10 fucking copies of all 10 sides of La Traviata. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It allows you to kind of break it down.
Sure.
Fantano, I was told by somebody else, I don't watch Fantano, but Fantano talked about a lot of filler, which again I think is completely arrogant because he split it up into 5 parts, and stretching out is a big part of what he's doing. And Kamasi is not only creating this new language, he's not only at the vanguard of what's new, but what it is that he's also represents is he represents look back at a lot of the stuff that made him who he is. You know what I mean? So when he expresses himself through his horn, and that's what made the Epic such a brilliant record. It's just he's expressing himself, and he's doing this in a way that hasn't been done in a while, and he sounds new. He's got that hip-hop flavor, you know, from playing with the guys of the Get Down, the West Coast Get Down. But on the other hand, you hearken back to, you know, the John Coltrane's of the world, and the Pharoah Sanders and the Alice Coltrane's of the world. And I mean, those are Cannonball Adderley during the 70s was pretty out there too, you know. And
Sure.
I mean, this is all awesome stuff, and that's what made him such a big deal. In this particular case, for this record, let's say if I had to say which record would bring in a new person or an uninitiated person into the world of jazz quicker, I always said that the Epic was perfect for that because it represented all things. But I did recognize that a lot of the freer elements of his jazz playing, right, would turn off somebody who's new to jazz.
Sure.
Right? Because it's just, he goes crazy. Sorry?
If you don't know to expect it, it's pretty hard to square.
Yes, it is.
It's not something that you're easily adaptable to.
It's another language, and it's a harsh language. You know, so you need to understand it.
Yeah.
You know, so in that perspective, I find the new record, Heaven and Earth, to be far more accessible because he seems to lay off a lot of the really free-blowing. It's still there, but it's not at the forefront as much as it was with the Epic. Okay, right. And he seems to be borrowing a lot more from some of the more CTI and more jazz soul, more kind of soft elements of jazz. And it always brings me back to CTI. I get that feeling. And one thing, I'm curious to listen to it for yourself. I want to see what you think as well, Billy. But one thing that caught me immediately is, while his personal soloing is diminished compared to the Epic,
right?
You hear a lot of the other guys. He kind of like leaves the stage to a lot of the other guys. So you hear tons of drum solos, tons of piano licks and rolls and stuff like that. And, you know, if you want that, there's a lot of wankery that happens. You know, it right. it feels a little bit like a showcase for like what the other guys are doing.
To other people.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I guess you'll be a judge of that for yourself, right?
Sure.
What did you think of the record from what it is that you've heard up to now?
Well, like I said, I haven't given it enough time to make any sort of a decision, to be quite honest. I mean, I've listened to a couple tracks on the train, in the earpods.
Okay.
AirPods, whatever they call them. And at that point, there's simply no way I could honestly give everybody a description. I can tell you that, you know, from a guy that likes to play the game of what vinyl is about, I really both love and hate the mystery LP hidden inside the package that you have to cut out. It's visually it's a beautiful package visually when you look at it, when you open it up, and you've got this nice gloss varnish on the jackets, and you've got heavyweight inner sleeves. It's a lot to pack into a build the way it's built, but that's nothing to do with the music. So, yeah, what am I even talking about?
Well, look, we went over the music, but you know what? Ultimately, I think vinyl junkies buy records. We spend money, and I mean, this is not a cheap thing, okay? I think it's like 50 US or more, 50, 60 US in the States. I paid
I think it was 55.
I paid like $90 for this once tax were included. So,
Right.
you know, and I was happy to do it because I love the music. But the thing is that something happened which made me, I'm not likely to play this anymore. I'll tell you why. Okay. The vinyl experience, you know, you open it up and it looks really nice. I like that. Okay, there's the entire thing that you have to open up the package for the choice. I was fine with that. I made my choice. I found it clever. The joke's on me. I'm okay with that. I'm not that type of a collector. It's about the music. But there's something that happened. All right. Especially in the case of the choice. You drop the needle and there's a whoosh. And the record skips everywhere. And then you play it on the other records and you notice that it's less. The whoosh you hear a little less, but there's skips that happen and it's consistently at the same spots, right? So you think to yourself, maybe the record's dirty. Let me give it a wash. And you look at the record and there's a lot of those surface scratches. You know, kind of like that surface film, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like it's like a, what do they call it? Like, it's not buff, it's the other side of it. It's a scuff. It's like it's like
light scuffs, yes, paper scuffings. The records are filled with paper scuffings. So I put this thing in the I wash it, I give it a nice bath in my vinyl style cleaner, vacuum it, do everything. The skips are still happening in exactly the same places. Right? I go in with the brush, you know, really just trying to say, I want to be fair with this record because it would be a bummer if it doesn't work. Right, and as I'm playing with this record for it to happen, the whoosh I realize will never go away. It'll never go away because that's the record itself.
Correct.
I look a little deeper. I look at the skips. You know what it is that's making it skip? There's divots in the record. There's divots. There's dimples in the record. It's like those records that are fucking made in Jamaica, you know, with little pieces of paper. So this is a defect. Now, I spent $90 on these records.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you hear it, the thing is when you hear pops and crackles, it's one thing. That's over time, and there's a nostalgic element. When it is that you buy the record and it's defective from the moment you hear it, you can't unhear it. You'll hear it for the rest of your life. So now, what it's done is it's triggered off my OCD to the point that I can't fucking listen to this record on vinyl anymore, motherfucker. So I spent 99... It's like... dude, my life... Fuck.
See, here's the thing, Sam. If you could go back in time and not take out the choice, but leave it in, at least in 20 years, it would be some sort of special collectible.
If I could turn back time.
Stop singing to me.
I realize you're right. You are right. But it's got divots. It's got all this thing. So what I did is I went backwards because now I'm fed up. I'm fed up of buying new records. And the ones that cost the most are the ones that are fucking me over. Right? So... I go back. I gotta find out I have to find out what's the deal here. Is it mastered poorly? Is it pressed poorly? What the fuck is the deal? So I go, I see it's mastered at Masterdisc. Now, Masterdisc enjoys a good reputation. They cut vinyl very well. They're very careful. But we don't know. We don't know. I go a little bit further. I look at who made the records, and it's Rainbow. So I go into my collection. I don't have all my records in Discogs. I have about like 3,900 of them in. But Rainbow. So what I do is I start doing a little bit of research on Rainbow. Okay? The first research I do is how many of these Rainbow pressings do I have in my own collection? So I go into my Discogs and it comes up with 106 different records that were pressed at this Rainbow plant. It gets a little more confusing now, Billy. You know why? A lot of the records that I know sound like shit start popping up all over the place. All the records that sound like shit start popping up. Not the Pirates press, but the Scorpio stuff. All the Scorpio stuff starts popping up. It's like, oh, okay, well now I know that a lot of the garbage is coming out. But the thing that confuses me is that there's a lot of the really good stuff that's being pressed there too. So I'm seeing Light in the Attic pressings that I know sound amazing. I'm seeing Superior Viaduct stuff that's I know is amazing. I saw, for example, that you guys are putting out Morphine Yes. You're reissuing it soon, right?
Sure. Yep.
I have the original Rhino reissue of that. So right away, it's like, I pulled that off the shelf yesterday. It's like, I gotta hear this. It sounded fine.
Right.
right? So it's like now you're kind of in that conundrum where it's like some of them sound terrible, some of them don't sound terrible. But, and I see some 4 men with beards, again, you know, the dubious thing. The thing is that when you're buying records, it's not a crapshoot. You put your money down, and if you don't like the record, and if you come up with a dud, it's no good anymore. You can't be halfway on things. That's why I stopped buying 4 men with beards, and that's why now, as a result of the Kamasi Washington record, okay, I will start looking at where the records are pressed, and I'm not going to buy records from there anymore because I can't be true. It's just, I'm not trying to fucking lay shade or anything like that, but I spent $90 on something that is such aggravation to me, because now I can't get that money back, Billy. I can't go to the record store because the record store doesn't know any of this. How am I going to get it? I want my money back. I don't know. You know what? I don't even want my money back, Billy. I just want a good record. That's all I want. Don't give me my money. Just give me a good record.
Yeah, that should be the mantra of everyone that's in the game at this point. You're right. Like, I don't want my money back. I just want a great record. I mean, look, I think that no matter what the plant is, no matter where it is around the world, no matter how quality it is or not, there are steps that can be taken both at the plant and also sort of with the label that works with the plant to try and essentially eliminate as much of a bad record as possible. And you know, sometimes every system that you have built breaks down. It's a really unfortunate experience. To your point, you know, a specific plant, you're mentioning Rainbow right now, like, has trouble with some records. I would say from a person on this side that the responsibility to work with the plant to make sure that that record is as good as it needs to be is on the label who actually produced it.
Fair.
You got to put records into all sorts of different places. Sometimes you'll have a plan to go to one plant and test pressings won't be approved and you have a problem, or you want to go to that plant and they say, hey, we can't hit this date for you because there's 5 records in this package. So yes. Imagine, you know, because I think the thing is that, you know, it's not just the packaged record. What you have to look at is what a plant can do capacity-wise, how many units of raw vinyl are in that package. So just imagine, you know, you're making 5,000 records. Well, it's 25,000 records. It's not 5,000 records. And where can you put them? Sometimes you have to go to a plant that maybe isn't your first choice. They can still do a great job, but you as the person that's A&R admin, that's A&R, that's production, you have to make sure that every single piece of it is done in a way that rises to your level of satisfaction. And we all fuck up, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah, but the thing is
we blow it.
Actually, one thing that you did that raised an interesting question, and it was a little wrinkle that I didn't think about until you raised it when we were talking yesterday about this doing this show, is how ultimately the quality control has to be on the label end also, because when you look at the disparity, okay, of these records that were pressed at that same plant, there's stuff that's garbage, but I knew that the Scorpio stuff was garbage. I bought it because it was $12. I was comfortable with that. Okay?
Right.
But on the other hand, the Superior Viaduct stuff I'm paying $40 for because I expect perfect and I get perfect. So Superior Viaduct pressed at the same plant. So what is it that makes the difference between a 4-man with beards and a Scorpio and a Light in the Attic and a Rhino? What makes the difference? The quality of control has to be somewhere. And you're right, the onus up to a certain point has to be up to the label themselves and say, you know what, this isn't acceptable. We can't put our name behind that. And I think, okay, that if we have to look at that, taking that new wrinkle into it, Kamasi Washington's vinyl, the people who handle Kamasi Washington's vinyl record dropped the ball. Because if I had to go back, I would not buy this record. I would not. I consider this a waste of $90. I'm not talking about the music. I love the music, but I am, I'm convinced that it's not my system because I'm seeing the same thing consistently on 5 records, 5, which brings me to another thing, because the other problem we had, you remember, I had mentioned this originally with the Coltrane box. Could it be that maybe it's because they're pressing multiple records at once that the quality control is dropping?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be based on the number of records that you're making, because again, everything has its own unique master. Everything has its own unique set of stampers.
Yeah.
I think the only way that you might find there's pressure on a project is, you know, you're trying to hit a date and things get behind, and you might ask for things to be rushed. Now, again, I'm just guessing, right? I'm not actually, I have no knowledge of Kamasi's situation with the way this record was produced and released. But in the case that happens, sometimes what can occur is you're asking for something outside the norm because you're sort of stressing the system, and the chances of things going wrong go up. I have to believe that the intent was to release a great record that sounded great, that delivered on the experience of vinyl.
It's well mastered.
That had to be the intent.
The intent is, and I can see that you're right there, because the intent is there. They're looking at a clever package, they're trying to do, but it fell apart. Okay, because it does sound good. It does sound good. If you're talking about the mastering, you're talking about the plates. You know the difference when it's the sound, when it's the plates that are faulty, and when it's just the vinyl that's noisy. You know, you can tell there's a difference, right? And the difference is obvious. It's the vinyl that's just, they pressed dog shit. And there's, you know, there's the scratches and there's the divots.
Sam,
it's not just one thing. What's that?
So there goes Sam, not mincing words.
Well, look, can I show you something? Okay, just so that you know, okay? This here, just let's leave on this, but you can judge for yourself. I noticed this just now. I've had this record for 2 weeks now, okay? And this you will be able to see on video. I'm going to show you something.
Okay, I'm watching on the other computer right now.
Oh, I know. I'm going to show it, but I'm going to tell the story behind it before you see it, okay?
Okay.
Down here, dude, this is temperature controlled. We've already established I'm a peculiar fellow, so I got temperature controls happening over here. I got air conditioning, I got dehumidifiers, I got fucking fans, I got everything happening over here. I can't produce a show worth shit, but I can get the right temperature to store my weed and my records. I'm a fucking genius. I'm like Forrest Gump. So everything's beautiful here. My records are nice. Can I show you my Kamasi record? Can I show you my Kamasi record? Now you can look at the camera.
No, please. I've been watching this whole time, and it's a time delay, so it's very strange.
Okay, so what you'll do is you'll see something.
Great.
Okay, and that's something that, that there, you know why that is? That's because the packaging inside is not done properly, and it's being stressed somewhere. The paper is not folding properly. So what happens is that it looks like a piece of dog shit like this. It looks like this thing is water damaged. It's not water damaged in the least. Okay? Look at me, dude. I weigh nearly 300 pounds. I don't got a drop of sweat on me. You know why? Temperature control. We can do that. We can do that.
Right.
This is not humidity. This is a poorly packaged record. I am not buying the music. I am buying the music on vinyl. Vinyl is the experience that I am trying to purchase. I wish for the experience to put me in a zone that just listening to the music itself cannot. If we look at the 2 records we talked about,
sure, yeah.
The John Coltrane exceeded expectations. With the fold out, reminding me of newspapers, the well-written liner, everything exceeded.
Yeah.
The Kamasi Washington, and again, we're not talking about the music, completely fell apart because my OCD gets triggered. My record looks like a piece of dog shit. You have to damage the cover to get to the record. The record's... You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand.
And I'm not going to go through the trouble of trying to get another record. I'm not going to go through the trouble of doing it. I just want the fucking record. So what happens is...
They might hear this and then send you a
Yeah,
record.
you know what happens? Can I show them what happens? Here. Right there. You fucking got me right in there. That's what happens. You fucked me. You're fucking your fans. You're putting out a product. Have respect for the product. There has to be a standard. You buy a car, the fucking air conditioning starts tick, 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 tick. That's a broken car. That is a broken car. All right?
Yeah, you're right.
Listening to it on faulty vinyl doesn't enhance my experience. It makes it worse than a stream, is what it does. I would rather listen to it on stream. That's how bad.
Right.
And if I had to buy it, I'd buy it on CD. That's the truth. Does that mean that I wouldn't buy it again? You know what, Billy? Just to let you know where I'm at when it comes to this, if this was released properly, and I know that it was pressed in 2 different ways, okay? It was pressed in Europe and it was pressed here, so I can't speak about the European pressing, but I know that if they took this record and they did it right, I would spend another $90 to get it because I want the music.
Right.
Okay, so that's the example I guess I want to finish on, which is to say that it's not just music, dude. It's music on vinyl. So what you're selling, you know, record companies have to stop. Record companies have to stop. They're not selling music. They're selling music on vinyl. They're selling a product. Okay, and that product appeals to guys like me who spend thousands of dollars a year on this record. You know? Does that make sense?
I'm going to interject something real quick.
Go for it.
It's not a product. It's an experience.
It's an experience. It's a piece of art, dude.
It's music, and it's an experience. I mean, I know that the packaged good becomes a product, but
it's
the conception of it, the execution of it, it's about giving someone a superior experience.
Correct.
And again, every time we fail at that on our side is detrimental to the whole thing.
There's no more excuses for it, and you're not trying to lay shade. It's just it can't anymore. It's just it can't. It's got to stop. There's got to be a level. There's got to be a standard. And you know what? It frustrates me. I don't want to throw shade. This guy, it's like, I think this guy is fucking the jazz messiah. I think he's amazing. I love everything he does. I love all of the jazz that I learned because of him. I didn't know who Ronald Bruner Sr. was before. I didn't know who Cameron Graves was, who Tony Austin. You know, I knew Thundercat. I knew Fly Low, you know.
Sure.
You know? So I'm not throwing shade on the artist. I love the artist. As a matter of fact, I'm telling you, I'll buy another copy. Just like I'll buy a good mono box set of those Coltrane records, but I can't play those. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that fair or is that too angry?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, look, you know, I think it's fair.
Did I go too far by pointing at my ass?
Yeah, I think you might have.
I get excited. I'm sorry, Billy. You know,
it's your show. I guess you get to do what you want on your show.
Yeah, but you know what happens is life is full of regrets.
Well, that'll be a tiny one. That'll just be a really tiny one.
Just a little one. Yeah, it's just, you know, I'm 48. 48-year-old men shouldn't be acting like this. Let's face it.
Well, that's definitely true. You're right about that. But you know, then again, you know, here we are.
Here we are again. We're going to give away prizes. I hope you had fun, man. I had a blast, dude. This was so much fun.
Me too. Yeah, it was a good time.
You're a fantastic guest host. So what I'll do is I'll show the records again and pick a winner. So you guys pay attention now. Now's the time. Share this shit. If you haven't shared it, now's the time. These records are all available on Org Music. So buy them up. I am showing Coltrane Jazz on Atlantic. I am showing Black Lion, Dexter Gordon, Walk the Blues. They do a lot of these, and I don't know if you can see it online. Yeah, you can. You'll see the spines are kind of colored. All the Black Lion stuff. If you look right behind me, you'll notice that I have a bunch of Black Lion stuff. When you collect them, they just make really neat spines. So for those guys who like spine porn in their jazz, this is great. And then, listen, all things CTI. In my opinion, my favorite, Antonio Carlos Jobim Records, Stoneflower on CTI. Do you have it?
I do not.
It's very, very good. Very, very good.
I see that record, though, in bins fairly often. So.
Yeah, I would say pick it up immediately. I mean, obviously, he's known for a lot of the stuff that he did with Stan Getz and, you know, that whole thing. But for my taste, it's my favorite record. It's just easygoing and kind of stonerish, and everything's gonna be okay. You know what I mean? It's like the reggae of Brazil. It's like the rocksteady reggae of Brazil.
I like it. It's everything's lovely. Gonna be okay.
And the winner of our prize will be Alessandro, I believe his name is Solti, but Alessandro, you shared, you did everything. Thanks for doing it all. You guys subscribe, do all of that. We're going to be doing a Run Out Groove show pretty soon, aren't we, Billy?
I think so.
Fun. So we're going to talk soon. I'm going to wait for the Warner box. I love the Warner box when you send that stuff. I think you're... Well, look, you know, that's what we're going to talk about next. So it looks like maybe we got some 80s revival happening and maybe some Tom Petty. Guys, there's big Tom Petty stuff happening these days. We're going to be involved, won't we, Billy?
That's right.
I love you, buddy. You're the best. Thanks, man.
You're good, buddy. And have a lovely rest of your Sunday, all right, man?
Yeah, brother. This was the best.